Julie Kane, what do you have for us, please?
Oh, I have a cheerful one since this is probably our last round. This is actually an occasional poem. A former student of mine who was getting married asked if I'd write something for the wedding.
Ah, yes.
At the wedding, and so I thought I'd better interview her and her fiance and find out a little bit more. I knew my student really well, but I'd never met him, and I didn't really know anything, about him. So I found out how they met, and that's the title of this: How They Met, for Hanno and Sabrina. In Hollywood, they'd call it meeting cute, a costume party, Halloween, his place. Fake blood congealed on the cadaver's face, the Duke of Darkness in a formal suit. Throw in a jealous date, a loud dispute, a streaking guest, a pirate giving chase. In all that drunken revelry, what grace made Cupid aim his little bow and shoot? One rainy evening after Halloween, they sat and talked until a restaurant closed. The Duke unmasked, an engineer in jeans, the corpse a teacher, lovely as a rose. May we who bless their marriage be as wise to recognize true love beneath disguise.
Well, thank you. You're carrying on the mask tradition that we've established in this little run here.
Yeah, I guess.
I love this one, Julie. This is so good.
Thanks.
It's so good.
They met in
the tone is lovely too.
Yeah.
They met wearing hideous costumes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, after the first line, we enter into, the mask of the Red Death for the rest of that octave.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
it's true.
Really gruesome. So it's lovely. It's lovely how you turn that. It's so good.
Oh God, yes.
Just in real terms, I think that meeting people it's a dynamic that is so often built around the masks that we're wearing for ourselves and for each other when we meet strangers in general, that we prepare to face to meet the faces that we meet. But the flip side of that coin is that if you do meet people in a circumstance where everybody is explicitly masked, is hiding behind something, it frees you up. There's an absence of self-consciousness because you can't be seen. And so in a way, I think it's a great way to meet somebody that later on you're going to get to know much more deeply. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that had anything to do with the real circumstances under which did they talk much about what it was like when they first met and what they talked about at that party?
Oh, I don't know if they really talked at the party. I mean, they were in character, but it's, later when they met up in the restaurant afterward, it's when they really began talking. I think. But
the feeling I got was that it wasn't like if A then B. It was because of A, B because of A. In other words, they met and were introduced, and they talked enough that they wanted to carry it further.
Exactly. Yeah. But
so that's kind of what I'm
not in any depth. Yeah.
You got to make that first impression, and that's kind of what I mean. That sometimes the absence of self-consciousness that's brought about by the fact that you can't be seen. So, there can't be any spinach in your teeth.
And what you said about masking sums up my 17 years of living in New Orleans, I think, where year round.
Well, you have another poem for us that touches on that. So that's going to be a good capper for you. Yeah, this is lovely. And even you read it really well. The way that you read it enhanced the mood of the overall tone and mood of the poem. And And there's kind of the way you boil everything down, those lines in the middle of the opening stanza, throw in a jealous date, a loud dispute, a streaking guest, a pirate giving chase. And so with just 2 lines, we recreate what might have taken an hour of this party.
We hope, right?
Yeah, it's lovely, and it establishes just the right kind of context. So the corpse, a teacher, lovely as a rose, changes direction more than once within its slender boundary.
I wouldn't have, that's such a worn cliche. I wouldn't, if this was not an occasional poem, I don't think I would have used that line.
You would have said lovely as a rose, or
yeah, lovely as a rose. That's
because the corpse's teacher is not any kind of cliche that I've ever
no,
heard.
that's not.
I've heard of teachers as corpses.
But if you've written occasional poems, you feel as if you can be, a little bit more kind of obvious or,
Well,
cliche.
I think it works because it's in such a strange context.
Okay.
Get this very gentle phrase. I mean, it really is. It makes something that is very trite, fresh. It's in an entirely new country. I mean, I really think it works. Well, I think it's a lovely moment. I buy it. 100%. Yeah.
And for me, the corpse of teacher is the proximity to it is what makes that really work for me. That the corpse's teacher, I stop when I read that. And so then I'm ready. Lovely as a rose gets me jump started again. And my expectations have been allayed.
Well, thanks, because I did worry about that line,
Yeah.
For a keeper poem as opposed to one.
So did you read this aloud there or for them? Or
during the ceremony? Yeah.
It must have gone over which was great, right?
Yeah, they liked it. That's the main thing.
Nice. Well, that's great. Occasional poems take a special kind of gift, I think. Because you've got to play along with the situation. You've got to get down, you got to get off your piano bench. It's not Liszt going le concert c'est moi. You got to get down with the situation, and so it's unbuttoned and it's but when you can do that, it gives a terrifically uncommon look into the personality of the poet. That's good for people to see, because people that don't know poets think that poets are kind of walking 18 inches, off the ground all the time. And so you got to come down to earth to do an occasional poem. I've done this. I've had occasion to write not so many poems, but songs. I've written occasional songs, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like, wow, you made this thing for me.
Oh,
yeah. They don't have to know how long it took. So, anyway, this is good. I'm glad you have this in with the rest of, and of course it's in a group of 5 poems on holidays and seasons. What's the likelihood that 2 of them are going to be on Halloween?
Yeah.
But you did it. So, okay. This would be the penultimate, if I got my vocabulary right, Mr. Wilson, for you.
So I will mix it up. I normally end gigs with one of 2 poems, and this is one of them. But because it's also an autumnal sonnet, I think I'll do In the Harvest Season. And
okay.
and it's about as hopeful as I get. It's certainly not as charming and delightful as Julie's sonnet, but this is as bright as I go, I think. So this is from the first book, In the Harvest Season. It's finished. Waiting's all that will remain. The gossip now must go unverified. Blue smoke from leaf piles, smoldering like pride, hangs here. A ghost, a storm cloud that can't rain. Last night, the county's final weather vane fell in the high winds. Old roofs, stripped bare, preside. Take down the ragged self you've crucified and let the crows wing through the fields of grain. The sagging fence will never stand up straight. Whatever is not ripe now will never be. That pain tormenting you will not abate. And in the windows of vacated banks, you'll see yourself passing by aimlessly. You cannot change your life. Give up. Give thanks.
You've been reading Rilke.
Yeah.
Rilke.
It responds to a couple of Rilke's poems that are in Proteus Bound.
It's Herbstag.
It's Herbstag, and then of course the last line is nodding it. Okay.
Unruhig wandern, wenn die Blätter treiben. That's the mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, du musst dein Leben enden, you must change your life. That's the reference.
Yeah.
So that's what I didn't know that you had read and translated German, but that's what I thought of when I read this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Al, do you have this guy? It came out a year ago.
I do. No, I don't. I have The Stranger World.
This is my selected translations.
Oh, okay.
Called Proteus
Bound. I gotta get.
Yeah.
So you've got some Rilke translations?
I do.
Oh, excellent. I want to read them.
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
Ah.
Oh.
So once again, you're cutting against the expectation of the seasonal imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, when you hear harvest, you think of plenty.
Mm-hmm.
Or others do. You don't.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
I don't see the crops that have been brought into the barn and anywhere in this poem. But wow.
Yeah.
Vacated banks, the windows of vacated banks. You'll see. This is very cinematic as visual imagery. You could do a montage of these individual images, and they would be cumulatively very, very powerful. Am I right in thinking that the last two lines of the first stanza refers to taking down a scarecrow?
Yeah.
Do people actually take down scarecrows?
You can when you brought in the harvest. They're not. What are they going to scare? I mean, what's the point of having?
Don't need it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Preserve it.
Yeah. It just, again, I'm not a country boy, so I didn't know that whether it was a common thing or an uncommon thing, but it's a powerful thing for your purpose in this context.
Yeah.
You've crucified yourself. So, wow.
He has the high winds in that poem too. Like so many of your poems have that strong wind blowing through them. It's and the image, the reflection in the vacated bank window really struck me too as one of the most powerful images in there. There's something something about bank and vacated, and it's almost like
yeah,
the South is sort of bankrupt, and there's something too kind of American about it, bank and capitalism, and just ooh, I don't know, this it's a really, really resonant image. It brings in not just nature, but a lot of other layers too.
Yeah, it's biblical. The harvest here is the biblical harvest.
Yeah.
It's often behind what I'm doing, there's a sort of theological thing. Al, that's obviously the case for you as well. A lot of theological nuance in yours. Mine are not very nuanced, I don't think.
Well, this is I like the way the language telescopes the imagery. So, for example, last night the county's final weather vane fell in the high winds. So what that does is it takes the image of a weather vane being blown down in a high wind, and it telescopes it out an entire county. Every single other weather vane has been blown down, and this is the final one. That just multiplies the power of the image to me. Yeah. So, the roofs have been stripped bare. I mean, I don't even know how to take that. Are the shingles gone? What kind of roofs are they?
That's for you to see in your imagination now.
Yeah.
Can't help thinking of Dylan too. You don't need a weather vane to know which way the wind blows there.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, again, this is stark in its darkness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when you began immediately before reading this, Ryan, by saying, what did you say? This is as hopeful as I get, or
about as cheerful as my poems get. Yeah,
as cheerful as my poems get. If you hadn't have said that, I would have asked you, do you have any poems more cheerful than this? But apparently not.
I mean, I have some light verse some nonsense verse that is more cheerful than this, but
okay. Well, I'll come back to the idea after. Well, I might as well read this one that I have, and then maybe I can broach an idea. This is another one that was written on Christmas. It was written in 2016 on Christmas Day. It's called "The Magi Lose Their Way." On our journey from the eastern lands, the new star in the night sky kept us on our path through many difficulties. Out of compass from our constellations, it made an easy guide, glowing and low, hovering above that distant place where lay the infant king we'd heard about. But on the way, we passed a city ruined, desolated utterly by war. Not one stone there stood upon another. No one could be found to tell us how or why they'd met their fate. But smoke hung thick above the rubble, troubling the sky, as though the earth had somehow wrapped itself in its own winding cloth. The crackling embers in the wreckage made the only sound, their faint, dull glow, the only dying light. The waste of that place made us pause, until we saw the grounded sky bereft of stars and realized we'd lost sight of our guide. What heaven had provided, men on earth had labored to obscure. Which was our way? At first, we were despondent, overwhelmed to think that such fair promise could be lost. Contagious in that place, the darkness dimmed our faith itself, and it was tempting to sit down, curse humankind, and brood on chaos. But that would end our journey. Then the dark itself, tasting of iron, gave us the answer. The ash that clots our lungs and coats our tongues, the grit that irritates our eyes and sticks between our teeth, This shroud that pins us down to earth is just another kind of cloud. The stars we reckon by still burn beyond. We are without original direction, but any heading is away from death. So we set out again despite confusion, blinded by what men do in this world, but trusting if we stayed on any path, however crooked man has made the maze, we would regain our sight, reorient ourselves, begin anew, and yet attain what may be reached from any starting point, the sacred ground of the Nativity.
Yeah. This strikes me, it's written on the journey, and unlike Eliot's Magi, which is looking back, in time.
Many years later, years later, yeah. Yes.
But still, you've got the end in your beginning, the winding cloth and death and the birth, hasn't happened yet. They're not even there yet. And already the ending is foretold in the signs in your poem. It's really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, that's there on purpose. I mean, it's really about coping with despair. How does one cope with despair? Because humans create circumstances that promote despair so often.
It's interesting, Al, because this is one of the, I was talking about the sort of theological subtlety. So in that third verse paragraph, right? At first we were despondent, overwhelmed to think that such fair promise could be lost. Okay. Contagious in that place, the darkness dimmed our faith itself, and it was tempting to sit down, curse humankind, and brood on chaos. Brood is such a fantastic word there because it harkens back to the beginning of Genesis, where the Spirit broods on the waters.
Yeah.
But here it's the people have set themselves up as God, and they brood on chaos, creating nothing. Yeah. And so it suggests that the despair is when we set ourselves up as idols to ourselves. We make ourselves our own gods. We worship ourselves. Julie, you have a poem in Mothers of Ireland that with that same thing, pray to anything other than your own name, something like that. It says.
Yeah.
But there's that line from C.S. Lewis where he says, reality is always iconoclastic, right? That there's always a sort of breakthrough. Like, this isn't about me. I'm not the center. I am not the icon. I'm not the god of the world. And so I feel like there's a lot of psychological and spiritual subtlety and acuity just in that word choice and what it suggests, Al. I admired that a lot.
Well, thank you. It's designed to be the contrasting clue. Thank you for reading it the way you read it, because it was what I had. It was exactly what I had in mind, because it's a subtle thing to try to find a way back from despair. Because the definition of despair is the inability to imagine a future. And so how do you come back? You have to imagine somewhere elsewhere in order to begin to move away. And so what follows those lines, this little description of how it really doesn't matter what direction you go in when you're in despair, because there isn't only one way out of where you're stuck. Any way away is in a good direction. And later you can restore, you get your bearings and figure out what your path needs to be. But in that moment, it's more basic than that. It's that you can't brood on chaos. You've got to. And so I was trying to tackle a difficult emotional turning point in a way that didn't seem artificial. So anyway, thank you for reading it the way that you read it, because it's exactly what I was shooting for. And again, my approach is almost always to look on the side that's coming up. You know, the sun also rises. Enough has been said about how it sets. And so it's the same thing in the solstice song. It's about how the change is happening, whether you see it or not. In several of these, the idea is this is not the end. As bleak as it seems, it's not the end. So I thought it would be very interesting for us to read, for Ryan, for you and I to have our poems next to each other, because I think they're complementary. Except I bring an extra little bit past the point of utter darkness. And that's just because that's my nature. I couldn't have written like Larkin if I wanted. But I wanted to ask you, and this is why I wanted to read this particular poem after the one that you just read, whether you find that, is there room in your work for mercy, forgiveness, and redemption?
Yeah. It just tends to come at the end of a dynamic movement, right? That the unnamed something that is underneath the snows is, well, it's described as being like love, and the way that spring is going to come up from underneath the snows. And in the harvest season, it ends with a recognition, well, perhaps you can't change your life. Give up, but also give thanks, because in giving thanks, maybe something greater than you are will change your life. Give thanks for what there is that is beyond your selfhood, which good. Can bring about that change. So yeah, and I was tempted to read. I have a poem on the Epiphany as well. Just yesterday. It's creatively titled "The Feast of the Epiphany," but it's the Magi, and it ends on, there's a turn at the end to a moment where there is a glimpse of hope, a glimpse of possibility of change, because I think that's important to have. I would also say it's very difficult to write a joyful poem that is plausible, when one considers the Paradiso and how difficult it is for Dante to get there, and how, in order to earn it, he has to go through hell and climb purgatory to get away with it, to earn that beauty, that majesty. Same sort of thing, but I'm not as good as Dante, and I'm not as good a person either, probably, and so I haven't yet gone up into heaven. So I'm still sort of struggling maybe on that mountain somewhere. But no, I mean, that's obviously something I think most people want to do, and where I would say the joy, the pleasure, if there is any in my poems, as I hope there is in the images and in the music, because I deeply love the beauty of the world. I think Robert Penn Warren says somewhere, beauty is another name for the world, and certainly I feel that. But there's also there's history, the nightmare of history. If we can go back to Ireland for Julie, and the two personal history. The two have to wrangle. Walcott in his Nobel lecture, The Lesser Antilles, he says, for the poet, it is always morning in the world in spite of the nightmare of history. And so in Derek's poems, he's always balancing those two, and he does a much better job of balancing. He's the most painterly poet we've ever had, but I'm trying to balance them. I'm just not anywhere near as good as Derek was.
Well, I would make a distinction between presenting a darkness without hope and presenting a darkness followed by hope.
Yeah.
And there are poets on both sides of that line.
Yeah.
And you can't manufacture hope. You can't fake any of the things that lead us to transcendence if they're not in you.
Yeah.
But if they are in you, there are different ways that they can come out. So the group of poems that we're dealing with today were such that I wanted to have a chance to get your sense of what the vision is and what else you're doing beyond the boundaries of this small group of
maybe
poems.
Just briefly, Al, I would say that for me, Dante is the central poet, and so I try to structure my books as a sort of catabasis and a return. So an exploration of the dark, of evil, of pain, of suffering, and then a return and try to move back up toward a vision of hope.
Well, good. I thank you for putting it into a nutshell, because I was curious.
Yeah, sure.
It's hard for me to tell. I sometimes rail against Larkin because I think he lacks the faith to be hopeful. And if you see what I mean. But anyway, so that's good. So where have we gotten to? Did you just read? Did I just read?
You just, yeah.
So we're starting round 5, Al.
Home stretch.
Are we doing
last
another one? I would be fine with not, but
yeah, okay. We're over 2 hours
Let's
in
do
now.
it. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Okay. All right. Yeah, this one, it doesn't seem to fit now from what we've been reading and talking about and everything. Maybe can I recite a short one from memory instead? This is thinking of. Well,
you could call it audible if you want.
Okay. Well, I'll do the one I was gonna do. This is since I'm in Louisiana and I've lived in Louisiana many years, the rest of which were in New Orleans. This is Mardi Gras Parade. Shy as I am, my arms fly out to every man in costume tossing beads. I do not beg as a rule, but even the gray-gloved winter trees have their fingers out, and the children around me pounce on the falling coins with shoes like the young tap dancers on Bourbon Street. I do not beg except from you. Maybe you're here with your wife and daughters, crabby, thinking the car is parked illegally and won't be there when you walk back to it after dark, swinging the jumbled treasure bags long after I have watched and gone. You are the jewels out of reach in those branches. I am the branches they snag upon.
It's another short story.
Yeah, another short story. This is, but the theme of holidays, it seems that all my poems that have obvious holidays in them were written when I was much younger. I seem to have gotten away from that, but yeah, this one is very, very old. Obviously, because yeah.
I think we can unfold this situation though from what we're given.
Mm-hmm. Certainly,
yeah. And so it makes the Mardi Gras imagery more pointed to know the emotional position that the speaker is in.
There's also this, again, there's that dislocation sort of thing. I mean, I know Mardi Gras is another mask to do in New Orleans. But I love the last two lines, but I am so the branches are out of reach, but I am the branches. So I am out of reach from myself. So there's this, right? This shift away that I can't even get to myself to get to you. There's a sense of sort of plunging and falling or receding endlessly that it's so how'd you do that? That's so good. I mean, I've never seen an effect like that. It's really, really cool.
I got caught on the last line for the same reason. And I went back and looked at, looked at the opening stanza where the trees are personified as having their fingers out. And I said, well, how did she get from here to there, where now she's one of the trees and the branches?
Well, from the beginning, my arms fly out, right? Like a tree's arms. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is it's funny. I snagged on the last line, as the language of the last line snags. And I asked myself, well, okay, how can this be? How can she be if the jewels are out of reach because they're on the branches, but she's the branches, then they're not out of reach, but somehow they are out of reach. Yeah. So yeah, it's an extraordinary effect. It'd be interesting to hear how you came to the final line. Was it did you work it out, or did it come to you and you figured out what it meant later?
It came out of nowhere. You know, I almost, you know, it just one of those given lines that just, you know, wrote itself. And then it was kind of like, oh my God, what is that?
But then but then you had the good judgment to leave it.
Yeah, I guess.
You didn't say, well, maybe people won't understand this. Maybe I should work with it a little bit. No, you leave it, and that's where that's the crack where the mystery of the poem shines through, because you leave it.
In New Orleans too, you see year-round along the parade routes, you see those trees with the, you know, the beads hanging in the upper branches. You know, and it's an image that that you live with, that you see daily in that city.
How do they get into the upper branches?
Yeah, kids will, you know, snag them off the lower branches, but they can't get the higher up ones.
But that image too, so, if it's February and so a lot of the trees would be bare, and they have it's sort of like those Diego Rivera paintings, you know, for Dia de los Muertos, where you've got the skeleton and a feather boa and jewels and stuff. There's something. It's such a neat, cool thing. I really, really like it a lot.
Oh, thank you.
This is great. Yeah, no, I'm glad you decided to read it anyway, because these choices don't have to fit together. They weren't written to fit together, and they weren't chosen even to fit together. So I'm grateful for each look into the way that we all work. So, but again, it just underlines what I said on the occasion of your first poem, that what you use the circumstance, the seasonal circumstance or the holiday circumstance, as a backdrop for bringing us into the center of the emotions of the speaker. And that's where we're left, is in the heart of the speaker and her feeling of dislocation and separation.
Yeah.
You know, and the details, the details are also delicious, because, for example, maybe you're here with your wife and daughters. Well, as soon as we get that line, we understand the relationship of the speaker and the person addressed. But you could have gone in a lot of directions emotionally after introducing that this guy has a wife and daughters? What's the next thing you say? Crabby. See, I like that. I like that. It's not romanticized. It's also not, it's not judgmental. It's not, I mean, you don't tip your hand about the feeling that you have, but you show something about how well she knows the person. And you just say it in one word. And then you enlarge on it, thinking the car is parked illegally and won't be there when you walk back. So that stanza shows, you're not saying how you feel about this guy. You're showing us what you know about him. And that says volumes about what you probably feel about the guy in the situation. So I really like that. It's a kind of a misdirection from what we might otherwise expect emotionally. And I think it's just cleaner, you know, not to descend into the name calling and the retributions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy. So you're not, is this too a long ago poem? When did you write it?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's very old. It would have been written in the late 1970s. Yeah, when I was, yeah, when I was in my 20s. And yeah, this, and when I was still, you know, still foolish enough, you know, to be in a situation like this, or, you know, or entitled enough and young and, you know, arrogant enough to have gotten myself in this situation.
Yeah.
5 years later, no. You know.
Yeah, I didn't mean to push you in this direction, but it turns out giving you holidays and seasons pushed you towards these poems because, as you say, you don't have holiday poems of more recent vintage.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't mean to, but I made you go way into the Wayback Machine.
You did. You did. Maybe that's a challenge.
Well, thank you.
Right.
Well, you know, sometimes it's because the holidays are so draining that they're not around the time that we think to write. Like I said, because I live alone, a lot of times there's nobody for me to speak to, so I speak to the page. Mm-hmm. Works out. But yeah, these are 5 lovely looks into the younger Julie Kane. The portrait of the artist as a young woman.
They're fantastic. Except for the first one, which seems fantastic. I haven't read it, but from what I've read today, I'm going to guess it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So good.
That's funny.
Well, thank you for your group. So let's, Ryan, let's have your last one, and then I'll draw the proceedings into some kind of a bow.
Okay. So, by way of introduction, not much to say, except for people who are not rural. A post hole digger is a real thing, and that's what it's called. And that's just such a, that's always struck me as like, that's what you came up with. It doesn't have a, you know, a funny, interesting, it's, what does it do? Well, it digs holes for posts. All right. Yes. I mean, it's just so on the head, you know. So this is called field work. A post hole digger. Heavens, just how tightly can sounds enclose a thing, penning it into a function that, wrongly or rightly, isolates it from the infinite and nameless stuff of possibility, driving it down in the hard ground of time. Sky-minded summer. And for 3 whole days, the old man never says a word to me as we repeat work's ancient paradigm over and over in the August blaze. What we were making was a phantom fence. From the night woods, wild things come to possess the fields they've lost to human violence and savvy. as the dark itself returns to bless the troubled mind with sleep. Then herds of deer, shy as dreams, graze the rows day's labor made, and woodchucks gorge themselves on cabbages. The ghostly bobcat and the fox appear, and timber rattlers, cooling in the shade, unfold like the nightmare that history is. It was to keep them out as best we could, and to protect the body's nourishment. We worked against that spectral brotherhood which summons us back to that place we went forth from, the reeling center where the prey and predator move together in a dance like lovers, knowing neither fear nor rage, seeing what is without the shadow play of mind, that place which is our provenance on earth and is our earthly heritage. 6 feet apart, a grave's depth, we dug holes around the field, leaving dirt piles behind us as if we were really tunneling moles, building a darkling home, our workings blind. But then came posts, and then the fence's wire. A shape emerged. Until our fingers numbed, we fastened lengths of fence wire to the wood, stretching it tight till, like some antique lyre, when plucked by the high winds, the whole fence hummed. The task complete, the old man grinned, said, "Good enough." It was, and wasn't. So things go. The fence stood 20 years, though you did not, grandfather. And I know now I can't know more than a few odd stories of your lot in life. You rarely spoke about your past, that drunken brute your father, or the war. Today, the field is scrub pine and broom sedge. Within the green walls, you repent at last, as was your work and what you did it for. Still, nights, I sense you coming to the edge of consciousness with those dark ministers of the forgotten you strove to keep out. And here, within the cricket's pulsing whirs, your endless silence, like a voiceless shout, imploring me with I can't understand what motive to do something different, to spare no pains, and to spare no cost, but make whatever work comes from my hand, summon the quick back to that place we went forth from, and welcome back from there the lost.
Gorgeous.
Thanks for this one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is going to be in the book next year, so yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's strong.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Neat thing you do in the outset of coming up with a metaphor about the nature of a word itself, that you make the name, you characterize the name as narrowly boring a hole into, limiting what, I mean, aren't words supposed to be specific, but you do something with it that I've never really seen done before, that I hadn't thought of before. That the sounds pen in within the word the thing that's described. And so it's true. Post hole digger is not going to be mistaken for anything else. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a very successful name, I guess.
Well, in some sense, right? There's no connotation, right? I mean, if I say summer, Al, you may see, Maine, and Julie, you may see, Boston, a Red Sox game, or New Orleans, and I'll see,
it's true,
hillbilly country. It's true. But if I say post hole digger and you know what it is, it's just the one thing. That's all it is.
Yeah, and it's a very specific tool.
But now we see your poem though, and all the echoes from your poem.
Yeah, I'll never see a post hole digger the same.
A net of connotations dragging behind it now.
Al, that's going to be on the back of the book. I'll never see a post-hole digger the same. That's fantastic.
So I did have a question. When you got to the end, my question is, you've described you've made the contrast between, the area that the humans live on that's usurped the original territory that these animals lived on. And we've got these, so we've got this a kind of a general Edenic overtone, that this was an Eden that they enjoyed, that they've been pushed out of so that we could do our thing. And they're trying to find their way back into. And that you're creating a barrier so that we can do what we do. But the way that you describe the things that we do is not all that. It's almost as though our sympathy is with the animals that have been dispossessed. Okay. Because they're pre-conscious. And so we live with consciousness, which is why we suffer and why we live between these poles of opposites, where they lived in this unbroken wholeness. So when we get to the very end, summon the quick back to that place we went forth from, and welcome back from there the lost. Are you talking about them who went away and tried to come back, about our moving away from the place where we began, and the opportunity for us to be welcomed back? Who are the lost you refer to in the last word?
You want to pin me down to things, Al, and it's where participation for the reader happens. I don't want to explain. The poem will come together. I promise. If you keep at it, it'll work itself out. I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
That's like saying,
there's another whole level.
Pull a quarter from behind that kid's ear. I don't want to do that.
There's another whole level in it for me too. It's probably obvious, and that's why you didn't say anything. But of the poem, of the the grandfathers making a literal fence, but you're making, you're a maker, and the field of the poem, and the aeolian harp imagery of the wires humming. It's
yeah.
Brought to mind, Seamus Heaney, field work in the poem Digging, where
yeah,
the pen, the slot pen in my hand, you're connected to the grandfather, but doing a different kind of making. Well,
that is one thing I'm bringing back. I can't believe neither of y'all said anything about the stanza.
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself. I used the Keats stanza from the Odes. I was so pleased with myself.
It's the Grecian urn stanza. Wow.
So yeah, lots of bringing stuff back, but we've seen that. That's what I do in poems, right? That it's whether it's Rilke or it's Horace or it's Haussmann, that often there's a kind of subterranean thing that I'm working with. I try to think about poems in layers or levels, and sort of stack them up, where on the first level they are very contemporary and pretty accessible, but you can kind of burrow into them.
Yeah.
See, that's just as good as telling me what the last word means.
But I didn't tell you. And all the fun's on how you say a thing, Al.
Yeah, you didn't have to tell me, but what you did tell me, I appreciate what you are telling me.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of layering different directions of meaning is something that, as a musician, as a songwriter, that's basically what I'm doing when I write songs, because I work in genres that are historical genres. And so I'm writing in blues forms most of the time. And the style of the music is also familiar. So when people hear my songs, they can connect it immediately with the antecedents and say, oh yeah, okay, this is familiar. But on another level, what I'm doing with the lyric is different from what was done with the lyric when the music sounded the way that it sounded then. So there's something for everybody. The people that aren't listening, a lot of people don't listen to lyrics. And if they're not, they have one whole set of connections that they can make to what they're hearing. But if they are listening to lyrics, then they've got a whole other set of connections they can make. But I'm not excluding anybody. I'm just leaving everything there to be discovered. And that's another way of saying
you're leading
what
the living or the quick back to your dead heroes who played in the blues form, and you're providing them passage into the future.
Yes,
that's pretty much on the money. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why I'm glad you said what you said, because you understand what I'm doing and I understand what you're doing on some level.
Yeah.
Very good. I didn't really know this about you up to this point, although I have The Stranger World. In fact, I was just reading it yesterday to help get more familiar.
I'm a man of mystery.
And I was I was struck again and again by the mystery in that book, and a poem like Authority has all the mystery that I got out of L'Avventura, if you know L'Avventura.
Yeah.
So
that's excellent. High praise. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, I would put them in the same corral, although they probably wouldn't live together very nicely. So, all right. Well, let me end the proceedings with something that I wrote a week ago or 2 weeks ago, because I wrote this on Christmas Eve, just Christmas of 2022. And it's called What the Angels Sang. Because, of course, all the carols tell us, angels we have heard on high. What the Angels Sang, Christmas 2022. The promise made in this nativity is one of an eventual redemption. The pain that rides out in the birthing bed of straw is Mary paid to keep the promise. The child is born beyond the gates of Eden, where toil and suffering, inherited, will bear him to his place of sacrifice not so long after, nor from Bethlehem so very far. The path is so direct. It leads from preparation to emergence, from miracle to ministry, to scourge and scorn, and meek acceptance of the nail. Through the passages of pain and death we make our way, and every transformation must be bought. All this is imminent in the manger, though it goes unnoticed. But the hosannas surging through the night aren't dwelling on the price of this new life. They praise instead the promise of a child born to recreate the possible. And forgive me, but I changed the word. I changed rushing to surging because I like it better.
Well, recreate is the boss word in the poem. And it's a wonderful word. With Christ as the God-man, but also as the second Adam, right? The new Adam. And really, really handsome conclusion there.
Thank you. My catechism came from Baltimore too, you know.
Yeah.
I think Julie's did too. Wait a second.
Yeah, I think so.
Who made you?
Yeah. I don't know whether people, when they see Gates of Eden, immediately think of the Bob Dylan song. Maybe you're not. Maybe not. But no matter. I meant it in the original sense. I guess he did too.
That didn't occur to me, but now that you say it, that's the second time that you've brought up a Dylan tune, and I thought, oh yeah, that. Yeah. Of course.
Well, I didn't just read Frost. I learned a lot from Dylan.
Me too. Yeah.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you. I've said this on another show, and I know this has gone a long time. I'm just going to say it one more time because it's a good little tidbit, and I haven't said it to you too. It turns out that when Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower, the way he wrote it originally, the first stanza was the final stanza.
So started outside in the cold distance? No, wait. Where does the last stanza start out? What is it?
There must be the way the
that first one starts. There must be some kind of way out of here.
There must be some kind of way out of here. Said the Joker to the thief. Yeah, that was originally the middle stanza. Okay. Huh. No, I'm sorry. So All Along the Watchtower, which is the final stanza, was the first stanza. That's what it was. So he set the scene, with the two riders are approaching.
Yeah, that's right. And the wind began to howl. Yeah.
And the wind began to howl. And then he said, I'm not going to put that at the front. I'm going to put it at the end. And so you end with that, talk about mystery, with the mystery of the two riders approaching and what the oncoming wind. And I just had to tell that here because there's been a lot of wind today.
Hopefully not just hot air.
Poems.
Not hot air.
Coming from us too. But I just thought that was a brilliant insight that he had to go from putting that at the front to putting it at the end. And so it always makes me think about that as a possibility when I'm structuring poems,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a sonnet that I couldn't get right and I was working on for years, and I showed it to my pal David Yazzie, and he said, "Oh, just flip the sestet and the octave." And I did, and I said, "Oh, now it's done." I mean, it was that it was just that was it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it really is that simple. Yeah.
Well, that's where our blind spots fall, is in the middle of the retina where the nerves are centered. That's why we have a blind spot, because the nerves that are conducting the electrical signals are bundled right there. And so there's no room for rods and cones. And so we've got a blind spot in the center of our vision. So there's a metaphor that might be fertile. I don't know.
It's unfortunate that it's always rods and cones and never cones and rods.
Yeah.
Because then you can sneak in, a rhyme that is hard to work into anything,
Well, I know we've gone for a long time, but that just means that we had a good time talking. And
absolutely.
Many, many thanks to the two of you. It goes without saying that the work is strong, but the conversation is a critical part of what makes these things work. And this was a wonderful one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've missed seeing you two so much at conferences. What with COVID, it's been great to get together today.
Well, this whole idea for this show really was COVID born out of necessity, out of just what you said, out of missing the conversations that we used to have, at Westchester. Yeah. So Zoom taketh away, but Zoom giveth. And one of the things that it gave was a chance for me to bring people together for a conversation that do not live close together. And so from here to Baltimore to New Orleans, nice to have you here in my basement.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Al. Julie, it's always lovely to see you.
You
too. Let's be in touch, y'all.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to send you something. I haven't sent you anything in a long time.
Sounds good. So, Julie, please send me things too.
Yeah, send me your addresses. Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm going to invite more editors on this show. I thought of that. Okay, well, farewell, and here's to a better 2023. It wouldn't take much.
Here. Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Yep, so long.